Welcome to the Intentional Leader Podcast presented by Reenergize Professional Coaching. We appreciate you listening in and learning with us. The stories and leadership tips you hear will help you become a great leader. Listen intentionally. Now, to our host, Sean Olson.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 27 of the Intentional Leader Podcast. This is the podcast where you hear the real stories of normal people just like you who have become extraordinary leaders. You'll learn some valuable lessons from their lives, lessons you can apply to become the best leader you were created to be. When you become an intentional leader, lives are changed. I'm your host, Sean Olson. I'm an executive coach, business owner, author, and speaker. Thank you for joining us today. Today, I'm very excited to welcome our guest, Keith Manier. Keith is the lead pastor of Grace Fellowship Church in Columbus, Ohio, specifically in Pickerington, Ohio, but it has multiple campuses across the Columbus area. And Keith also happens to be my pastor. Keith, welcome to the Intentional Leader Podcast. Great to have you.
Thanks for having me, Sean. Glad to be here, man.
Absolutely. So today we're going to dive in like we normally do with our opening question, where we ask our guests to tell us a little bit about their story, the progression through their career, and really specifically the leadership lessons gained along the way. And I know you have a great story because you didn't plan on being a pastor right out of the gate, did you?
No, not at all. I actually started college with the intention to be a chemistry teacher and a coach, and was going down that journey, and actually was coaching at my high school that I played at, and for a summer league game. And there was a kid that was playing who had played with me when I was a senior. He was a sophomore, and he was really good, but he wasn't like hitting his full potential in terms of playing in where we were playing. So I actually said to my high school coach, I said, "Coach, what do you do about kids who don't reach their potential?" And he said, "Keith, if you can't handle kids not reaching their potential, you can't coach." And so then I realized I probably can't coach. I'll probably go crazy. And so I shifted and said, you know what, I'm not going to coach. I'm just going to teach chemistry. And then that just kind of morphed into I'm going to do chemistry, graduated with a degree in chemistry, and moved to Columbus, Ohio after college. It's where my then girlfriend, now wife, was from, moved here. And 2 weeks after college, got a job at the Limited Corporation in Columbus, Ohio, with the company Bath and Body Works, and started working in R&D in Bath and Body Works. And so I was working in what was called their home fragrance division. So if you're familiar with the company, there's Bath and Body Works, and then there's the other side of that world that was White Barn Candle Company. And so I was doing a lot of work for White Barn Candle Company. So doing that for a long time, for a few years. And then my boss's boss at Bath and Body Works ended up saying, "Hey, I want to do a startup company, and I want to hire a few people away from Bath and Body Works." So she had left to go and do something else. She came back, so she hired me. So I went from a big company, lots of rules, organization, cafeteria, all the kind of things, big HR, to four of us trying to figure it out. And that was a big shift for things, to be honest, that I didn't even know all the lessons I was learning from those two worlds that would impact what I do now, but went through that. And so in the middle of that, I had promised my wife, kind of a long story, I'd promised my wife that I would spend some time overseas with her. So we felt led to take a 6-month space of that time when I was working as a chemist. We went and lived in Cambodia. We were thinking about going back and serving over there for a while. And so I learned a bunch of things about the world and about leadership and about myself in that season. And then come back, and some things kind of shift. And I found myself in a place where I had a very interesting week. And the week was, as some things led up to it, I interviewed with the church that now I pastor on a Sunday. I interviewed with Kimberly Clark in Appleton, Wisconsin on a Monday night and a Tuesday. On Thursday night, my wife and I got approved to be global missionaries in Cambodia. And on Friday, I got offered the 2 jobs that I interviewed for. So on that Friday, I found myself saying, do I want to go be a global missionary? Do I want to go work in Appleton, Wisconsin at an incredible job in a really amazing company? Or do I want to go be a pastor of this small church that was struggling to pay its bills? And so that was a very interesting moment. And so I'll kind of pause in the story there and see maybe where that takes us. But then that led me to the church that I'm at, that I've been at for going on 20 years now.
Yeah. So a couple questions as you're going through these different pieces. That shift you made working for Bath and Body and then jumping to the smaller firm. Most listeners, the leaders that we have that listen to us, there's always that risk factor, right? And the fear factor involved in that. So on paper, most people will look at a shift like that where you're going from this large company that probably compensates well. You have obviously you had upward mobility there to the startup before.
Yeah.
What drove you there?
Yeah. I mean, at the core, I think it's what we know as leaders. What drove me there was another leader,
Mm-hmm.
a leader who had great vision herself, who saw something in me and called that in me, or called that out of me and talked to me as such. She was willing to say, hey, I don't know where this is going to go, but I think you could be a big part of something that would be great. And I want to see that happen in you. And then there was just this was a stage in my life where, while my wife and I were married, we didn't have any kids yet. And so some of the risk factors were a little bit lower for us at the time. But if you said, you get one answer, why did you move? It was her leadership. It was her leadership that called that out of me and allowed me to step into something that it was a risk, and I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
But I was a real young man, Sean. Like, sometimes you don't know what you don't know, and that's helpful.
Yeah.
But it
Yeah.
was her leadership.
Absolutely. I love that. No, there are times in life to take big risks, times in life to take calculated risks, and times to just be stable. So
Yep.
that's great. So you made the decision to go to the church. Obviously, God worked in your heart in a lot of different ways to reveal
Yeah.
that to you and your wife. You made the quick comments. We'll kind of pick up the story from there. So from what I recall, small church, struggling, barely paying the bills, about 80 people. Pick up the story from there and how you've kind of led the church through transitions over the last, almost 14 years now?
Yeah, it's actually going on 20 years now. It'll
20 years,
be
I'm sorry, yeah.
19, a little over 19 and a half right now. So I showed up, and the church it had existed for a while, but it had kind of hit a peak and come back down. It was going through so many challenges that my very first weekend there were 52 people in the
Wow.
church, and about probably 65 to 70 that called it home. And no real direction, really good people. They had built a really small building a few years before that. They weren't really sure what was next for them. And they were struggling so much that they were paying interest only on their mortgage at the time. They couldn't even pay their total bills. And so what I saw when I went there was kind of two things, though. One was I saw a group of people that were really faithful and hungry, and they wanted to be led. They just didn't know where to go, and they didn't have anyone they hadn't had strong leadership. So they just wanted to be led. And then the second thing was I had a pretty strong confidence that, not that I knew what I was doing, but that God wanted me there to be used.
Mm-hmm.
And some of that came from a really pivotal conversation that I'm happy to share in terms of going into that. But so I get there, and as I step into that moment, what I really said was, I just want to do the right thing, the next right thing. Let's win this day. Let's win the next day. Let's win the day after that. But let's just do the next right thing. And so sometimes the next right thing was have a great conversation with people that have already been there. Let's get to know them, and let's just build the trust with them and keep them there. Sometimes the next right thing was win that new person who came, go get in front of them, connect with them, and win them forward. Sometimes the next right thing was changing some of how we were going about our weekend services. Sometimes the next right thing was creating something. I always tell people that leaders have to do 4 things really, really well. They have to know what to fuel. They have to know what to create. They have to know what to ignore, and they have to know what to kill. You come in and you look around and you go, what do we need that we don't have that's going to help us get to where we want to go? We'll create that if it doesn't exist. What can I ignore? If I don't give it oxygen, I don't give it money, I don't give it sound, it's just going to die on its own, but I'll probably lose chips killing it. What do I need to kill right away? Because this is keeping us from going forward. And then I always tell people, if you're going to kill something, bury it with dignity, honor it. Nobody was wrong on purpose. And then you step back and you say, what do I got to fuel? What's working that we can give energy? And so I spent a lot of time. I still spend a lot of time doing that. But early on, especially, what do we need to do with that? And so, sometimes that was move forward and what's the next right hire? What is the next hire? And how do we get good people? What's the next right leadership decision? So we just moved, and by God's grace and by a lot of hard work, we started growing family by family, and then some things happened and we had a big bump in attendance. And the next thing you know, you go from a 70-person church to a 120-person church. And then it's, oh my goodness, we're filling the room. We're going to go 2 services. And then it just expanded. I mean, we got to the point where we were full and we were shuttling people from up the street at our small building and shuttling staff. And then it was like, man, we need to buy land and we need to buy land. And then we're going to have to sell a building and build a building and go portable. And, so we went through all those processes. And so here I am all these years later, and we've been portable and we've added campuses and built campuses and changed campuses and lots of staff. But I think the principle that I would say all along the way is just do the next right thing. Just build the culture the right way and keep doing the next right thing. And that just allowed us to win.
I love that. So the interesting piece about that story and the next right thing, that concept, is it sounds very kind of like localized, right? Just the next piece. At the same time, I know that you and the leadership team at Grace are incredibly strategic.
Yep.
So help our listeners understand that concept of the balancing act between this 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10-year long-term strategy, as well as staying focused on the present and the next right thing.
Yeah. So, when you think about the next right thing, what you just said is 100% right. Like, that's split up into different pies that you've got to focus on and say, what is the next right thing? And the bigger your organization gets, the more you can have subsets of eyes focusing on that, right? So back in the day, a lot of my energy was not only on the day-to-day, but it was on the 30,000 feet and kind of everything in between. Now I'm able to task staff and other leaders to really keep their eyes on the right culture and the next right thing in their ministry, at their campus, in their team. And then I can stay with the leaders and think about the big picture of that. But it's a little bit of both. I think sometimes in organizations, you have to act a little bit bigger than you are if you're going to move forward. Other times you need to act the exact size you are. And sometimes thinking about what that looks like. So in church world, we're a big church, Sean, you know this. It's hard for our main location to say have a church picnic.
Right.
But back in the day, we could have a church picnic, right? And so it made sense to act that size then. Now it doesn't. But there's other things that when we were small, we said, we're going to try to think like we're a little bit bigger. We're going to try to build our communication strategies a little bit bigger. We're trying to build the weekends a little bit bigger. And so I think within leadership, it's saying, okay, at all those different levels, what does it look like to think about that next right thing? And you can't be so far down the road. You can't look so far down the road for danger coming that you miss the stop sign in front of you. And yet at the same time, the people who are the most successful and safe on, like, say, riding motorcycles or four-wheelers, they're people that have the ability to look down the road and close at the same time. And so it's doing both of those and going, hey, this is where we are. This is how we win this weekend. But do we need to buy land? What do we need to do about our savings? What do we need to think about for hiring? So I hope I'm answering your question, but it's trying to juggle both of those things at the same time, and then empowering people, leading people that you can trust to go do the things that allow the culture and the organization and their abilities to win at the next right thing while you might be thinking about something else.
Absolutely. No, it makes sense. And I love the parallels, though, between church and business, right? There really is no difference. We have a different deliverable. Church is there to impact people for their eternity, right? But it's still a business. There's a budget, there's buildings, there's people, there's leadership. So a question for you, and I'm going to kind of give the listeners the rest of the story. Today, Grace Fellowship has 5 campuses here in the Columbus area, thousands of people that are part of the church as a whole. So from a business view of this, you've gone from this small business of 50 some to 80 some people to this business of 4,000 to 5,000.
Yeah.
You, as the lead pastor, you have a elder board, just like businesses have a board of directors and things like that. But in technical purposes, to make the translation, you're the CEO of this company. You knew everybody for a while, and you were touching everybody for a while.
Yeah.
And you've gone through all these stages of growth where today, yes, they will see you maybe live on stage. Many of them see you on video. There are probably a couple thousand people that have never actually met you.
Yep.
How have you handled that? Stepping up, stepping away, and realizing this is the church God's blessed us with. And yes, I'm their pastor, but I don't even know them.
Yeah. To be honest, Sean, it's been hard, and there's been different transitional moments. I was just telling someone this story the other day that there was a moment when we hit about 1,200. I have a really good memory. I'm a little bit of a freak in that, like, I can
Mhm.
kind of hear something and lock it in and see things and kind of visually remember them. And so I used to like literally preach and take attendance while I was preaching, and I would know names and all of this. But we got to like 1,200, and I remember one weekend I was standing up there preaching, and I looked out and I'm like, I can't do it anymore. I can't get my arms around everything.
Mhm.
And I literally went to the elders at our next elder board meeting, and I said, guys, I got to quit. I can't do this anymore. And they're like, what are you talking about? And I said, I feel that I'm overwhelmed. Like, I just can't do it anymore. And it
Yeah.
was like, okay, let's calm down. Let's talk about this. And that led to a number of things. One of the things is recognizing that my job isn't to know everyone, but to make sure everybody's known. And how do I lead to that concept, right? How do I empower, create vision, and do that? Some of it is to recognize that my job was going to change, and it's changed a lot. In a lot of
Mhm.
ways, Sean, I'm the pastor of Grace, but I'm not a pastor of a lot of people. I'm a speaker. I'm a leader of
Yeah.
an organization. I'm a leader of a team. And so there's just a lot of people that I don't know. And so I had to embrace the change. I had to recognize my job was going to become different. I had to recognize some things that weren't always fun. I had to recognize that there were some people who would never meet me who would think I was great, and some people who would never meet me who would think I'm an idiot and a terrible person off the jump. And I had to become okay with that in my own skin as a leader based on
Yeah.
this is what I feel called to do and led to do. So I'm going to just step into that and just understand that's part of the price of admission of this role and this opportunity. I've also had to learn that in the moments when you do see the people, do your best to win, be polite, be kind, be courteous. Pastor Keith, I've never met you. I'm in a restaurant and they come up to me. I
Mhm.
need to do my best to make that next 30 to 60 seconds feel very real, genuine, kind, sincere, not dismissive. And so I've had to understand some of the new role, what that means when people meet me or see me, and embrace that. It means that I've had to get really good at trusting other leaders to do the
Yeah.
things I do. And so, I've become a leader of leaders that I have
Yep.
to make sure they get and they get after. Um, and some of that has been fun and easy and seamless, and some of that's been really difficult. I've had to be told, no, you can't have your hands in that anymore. I used to
Mhm.
be very involved in certain things that our elders or our staff or myself came and said, I can't anymore. I was really, really, I love global missions. I love international
Right.
missions. And I was super involved in so much of that process for years and years and years. And the elders came and said, you can't, you got to put your attention on other things. So those are some of the things along the way I've had to experience.
Yeah. So that's similar to a lot of people that elevate inside of companies, right? Where they have some things that they really, really enjoy. But as they move up, they have to let go of those things. In your
Sure.
sense, missions was maybe one of those heartbeats that you had to let go of. As my company's grown, I've had to let go of a lot of things that I love and treasure and enjoy. How do we stay focused, though, to make sure that we're not letting go of all that we enjoy and we have something that's really still driving us? So in your sense, like you're a leader of leaders and you are a teacher. Do both of those drive you? Is there one that drives you more? And how can our listeners, as they elevate and let go, still stay focused on what gives them passion?
Yeah, I think we all have to be honest and do some really good like personal EQ and self-assessment and say, what are you great at? And let people around you tell you what you're great at.
Hmm.
There's so much that's been written and talked about this when you talk about things like working genius and strength finders and all of these things that you can process. I think we all have to be careful that we don't deceive ourselves about what we're good at and what we really can do. But once you kind of know what you're great at uh, and what fuels you, you've got to fight pretty fiercely to hold on to those things. And you've got to do your best to let the organization and people around you know that. Now, I think what's just true, though, is most people on the outside see what you're awesome at and see what you're great at and what you shouldn't let go. And good leaders won't let other people give that stuff up. They're going to try to keep them in their sweet spot. But I think if someone's trying to take that from you, you fight for it, and you know that. You've heard the principle of like, if somebody's 80% as good at you at something that you don't love, give it up, empower them, let them go after it, and all the leadership models of that. But I do think what you're good at, what you win at, you got to fight for, and you got to say, I'm going to hold on to this. I'm gonna go after that. Sometimes that means saying that out loud to your board, to other leaders, like, guys, if you take this away from me, something inside me is going to die. And I think our organization won't be as good. And I don't think I'm going to be as good. And I don't think either of us want that. So I think there's some honest conversation about that. And then I think another thing is, when you're good at something, like, keep cultivating that craft so that you just become indispensable at it. You listen to me preach a lot, and I've preached a lot. I've preached a lot in my lifetime at this point, but it's something that I still work really hard at and take very seriously to continue to get better at, so that I feel like that improvement and that ability to get better at it continues to give me energy to continue to want to hold on to it and go after it. But some of it is, I think, knowing what you're good at, letting people affirm that, and then telling people, you can't take this from me. And what is your greatest contribution to the organization? What's the thing that if you go away from, the organization's gonna get hurt? For me, leading and preaching both give a ton of energy to me. What I would say, Sean, is I think our church on the surface would think the thing that Grace would miss the most if I went away was the preaching. And while they would miss my preaching, and while that would impact our church, the truth is, I actually think our church would miss my leadership more. And the most of the church doesn't know that because of what's behind the scenes and in the environments that takes place. But both of those really give me energy, because I really think what gives me energy is communicating to lead. And both of those find themselves in my position and in preaching.
I'm with you. I love that. And it's impacting others. That's the heartbeat of leaders, right? We want to elevate them. And when leaders begin to think it's about them and not others, that's where we mess up. Ironically, this week you preached about selfishness. It's so easy as leaders to become selfish and thinking that it's about us and what's taking place. So I want to transition for a second, Keith, because this is an important thing. I know a lot of people lead in nonprofits, and I'm going to draw a similarity here. Grace, today, I know that you have a paid staff that's pretty large, but that is way outnumbered by the volunteers that actually make Grace go every single week. And it's not on Sundays, it's every day of the week. There's volunteers that are impacting. So help our listeners understand, how can we as a leader impact people that aren't paid to follow us? We have to influence those volunteers to step up and really step out and do more than they've ever done, but we can't make them do it. How do you lead in that capacity?
Yeah, I think you both win and keep people in relationship, that you work really hard to get to know them to the best you can. And in a big organization, that can be hard, but part of what I'm saying is valuing them, like seeing them, supporting them, standing alongside them as they serve, coming alongside how they win, but relationship and winning and keeping them. I think vision, clear vision that is compelling and exciting. This is awesome. This is what's going to go on. Some of that, we call them like I see in you conversations. I see in you, Sean, that this is what you can be, and I want to call this out of you. I personally think that one of the biggest mistakes that organizations and nonprofits specifically can often make is they don't call their volunteers to a large enough vision and a large enough thing. I think they set the bar too low. Quality leaders and quality people don't want to be a part of something that doesn't really matter. They want to be a part of something that they think is significant, and they want to be called to something that's meaningful. And so I think setting a high bar and calling people to that, literally saying to volunteers, like, we can fire you as a volunteer because we're expecting a quality thing based on we want to deliver. In church world, we're sometimes so afraid to lose people that we won't call them to hire. But I say, that the Little League doesn't have any problem asking a lot of me. The sports world doesn't have any problem asking a lot of me with coaching or volunteering or whatever it is. So I think calling people to big things. And then I think with anything in leadership, but definitely with volunteers, like clarity. What is a win? What do I want? What are the expectations? What am I not asking? What are the things up front that are going to fail, or they're going to say you're failing or winning. I think at Grace, one of the things we've done really well early, we've kind of drifted from it, we've come back to it hard, is just a high expectation volunteer culture. And so I think if you want to win with volunteers, it's relationship. I won you on the front end. I'm going to keep you with that touch point. It's clarity. It's high vision. And then the I see in you putting them in their sweet spot. What are they great at? And along the way, celebration, is huge. Telling them we couldn't do this without you. You've heard me say that, and I mean this. Like, the heroes of Grace Fellowship are our volunteers. They are. I mean, we wouldn't be who we are without them. Period. And so making sure they know that, all those kind of things. You also have to recognize that volunteerism is a lot like anything, that if you don't deal with your worst, your best will leave. So you got to deal with the people that are problematic in those environments and say, nope, that's not going to happen. And, that manifests itself in lots of different worlds. But I think one of the places in church world is like the arts world. You get some divas sometimes on the stage, and so how do you deal with those folks so that you can have the best, still want to be around? So those are some big things. Again, volunteers who believe in what you're doing, they don't even feel like they're volunteering. They love it. They're like, I would kill myself for this. I mean, it's why we know the person who's been involved with Little League or youth sports for 30 years, and they've just seen kid after kid and family after family. And they're like, I wouldn't give this up, and people who get a sense for that and plugged into a great nonprofit feel the same way.
Yep. I love that. So one of the things I appreciate about Grace that you do different from a lot of other churches is you don't use the word membership. And I understand the heartbeat behind that. And for those of you that are in the church world with membership, the worldly phrase of membership has its privileges carries over, right? So it's like people become a member of a church and then they expect things from their church.
Yep.
Grace uses the word partner, but there's actually a course you have to go through. You have to sign on the dotted line. I'm committing to these things.
Yep.
But what I love even more, because this verifies where you're coming from and the high expectations, is it's a yearly renewal. So every single year we have to say, read those things again, watch a video, commit to those things, including serving. And I look at the corporate world as leaders. Once we have somebody on board, we do annual reviews and stuff, but we don't actually tell them, hey, reminder, this is why we exist. This is why you're here. Are you going to re-up? Are you in this year?
Yep.
What drove you guys to make that decision to say, we want these volunteers to have high expectations. We want them to say it every year. What drove you to that point?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things was when an organization grows really fast, you got to sometimes ask yourself why, and is that all good? And so for us, one of the things we were saying was like, we don't want to be, 35 miles wide and an inch deep. So are we really creating in church world, the product we produce is disciples? Are we producing people that really follow Jesus? We don't just produce people that go to church, but people that follow Jesus. And so we said, we want to make sure that our mechanism of partnership, of commitment, is discipling people. It's moving people to the end goal, while at the same time, it's reflecting not just a commitment to Jesus, but a commitment to this church, to this community. And we know that the natural, entropy and inertia of any person is to become internal, not external. They drift to themselves, not to what they're a part of. That happens in an organization, in a business. And so we said, we want to make sure that everyone is like, yeah, I'm still committed to this thing. I still believe in this thing. I want to be a part of this thing. And that there was a yearly mirror to look and go, not only am I saying I'm committed, I'm practicing the things that show I am committed. And then for us as leaders, we said, what are those things that not just institutionally, but for us, biblically, what do we think the Bible's called us to be in terms of how it shows up in a local church. And we said, let's put those in front of people and let's just have a real rhythm of that evaluation that pushes them both to commitment and ownership of their church, but also in the right direction of discipleship. And that led us to say we feel like a year is a good time for people to go, yep, I'm in, I can do this, but I'm also not lying to myself or the organization if I really want out. I have a fair chance to say, Grace has changed, I've changed. I don't want to do that anymore. So that's it. It really got to like that, and we as leaders, man, we want to own the proposition value of like, you say you're a part of our church. We owe you to serve you and care for you and love you. Big church. We just had 7,000 people come to Christmas. And so who's our church? Yep. Is it the 4,000 plus that come on the weekend? Is it the 7,000 plus that come at holidays? How do we determine that? And so what we wanted to do was, what's a way where somebody said, I'm in, and we said, we know you're in and we're committed to you. You're committed to us. We'll make sure that works. And so that also drove some of it.
Great. I love it. Well explained. So I want to focus in kind of more recent. So we live in a world today where leaders need to be agile, constantly adapting because the world's changing around us, even in the church world. So what's been the biggest leadership challenge for you in the last 12 months? Something that's been a challenge or you've learned about leadership that's new because of how the world's changing?
I think one of the biggest challenges I've experienced, I'll go kind of an internal one and then an external one.
Great.
The internal one is we've had a lot of staff shift for various reasons. You work a long time in a place and people change and shift. And so there was a long time where I could assume institutional history and relational credibility in my leadership with staff. And both of those things have changed. And so one of the principles that I've always known, but like I've had to really double down on in the last 12, 18 months is the principle of repetition, of coming back and saying the same things over and over and over again. The way I'm personally wired is I don't like that. I kind of hear it. Right. I know I don't want to keep hearing it again. And so sometimes, unfortunately, the way we're wired, we can think everybody else is wired or that everyone's going to go the way we're going to go. So sometimes I don't say things enough, especially even internally. But I have another leader who's a great leader next to me who is like, he's always all over me about the rule of like 7s or 8s. Like, you got to say it again. Yep. And so the last 12, 18 months with some staff turnover has really driven that principle and the importance of that and making sure that that's happening. And then I think the second thing that I would say from the outside is I feel maybe more than ever the different ways, even in the world, the way that it is that with all the different ways people can be communicated to and can connect to you, I think the value of proximity influence is higher than ever. We're recording a podcast. I'm actually getting ready to launch a podcast. We have messages that are online. There's content everywhere, and it's great content. It's great content. And there's so much value. I mean, I was driving somewhere the other day and 3 hours in my car, 4 podcasts. And so that it's super valuable. But I'm noticing that my influence is microwaved in proximity to people more than it is in just great content. And I've seen that in different times over my career, but I feel like we're in a season right now where, man, if I get 70 minutes with you over a breakfast, the amount of trust and forward movement I can propel in you, it feels like it's 6 months and 70 minutes in a way that is even distinct from what I felt before.
Absolutely. That's a huge piece. And that's a challenge to leaders because we think as organizations grow, we don't have time for all the people. We still need to make some time. The one-on-one touches make a huge difference. And I know in the church world, when you have had the opportunity to truly minister to someone, they are sold out to that church. Yep. But you have to have that opportunity to minister to them in some capacity. So Great. Well, this has been fantastic, Keith. We finish every episode of the Intentional Leader podcast with the same question. That question is this: what is something our listeners can do intentionally today to lead more effectively? Quick tip.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest tips that I tell leaders with this is put people today around you that will give you honest feedback about you and your leadership. I find that a lot of leaders, they think they understand their blind spots. They think they understand their weak spots. They think they understand their strengths, but they don't put people around them that will tell them when they have food in their teeth and tell them the truth. And so I think one of the most practical things that you can do today is to find people that are around you, put people around you that will truly tell you the truth. And that's not always bad news. Sometimes they're going to tell you great things.
Absolutely.
I think it's one of the most important things, particularly if you're a leader, that a big part of your leadership is upfront communication, and that people will come alongside you and tell you the truth about your upfront communication.
That's great. I love that. I know the phrase "it's lonely at the top" is legit for a lot of business leaders, but we have to be intentional to make sure it's not lonely for us by putting those people around us. That's great. Well, Keith, it's been great to have you. For listeners, we'll have in our show notes links to the Grace Fellowship Church. And when your podcast launches, Keith, we'll add that to the show notes so people can hear that at that point. But it's been a blessing to have you here. Thank you for all your insights. And thank you not just for your leadership, but for truly changing the lives of thousands through Grace Fellowship.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks for having me. I really, really do appreciate it. And thanks for being involved at Grace.
All right. We'll talk soon.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Intentional Leader Podcast presented by Reenergize Professional Coaching. Be sure to see the show notes for links to Reenergize Professional Coaching and links to contact our guests. Now, hit that subscribe button so that you are alerted with every new episode of the Intentional Leader Podcast.